Of course, here's a strong opening for a black ship that sails without stars, a voyage into the mouth of madness. A black ship that sails without stars, a voyage into the mouth of madness. The ocean was ink, thick and without horizon, the sky above it a vault of eternal black. No moon, no stars, only the endless dark, and the ship that moved through it, silent as a grave procession. They called it the Eidolon. No one knew from where it came. It appeared on nights when even lighthouses failed, when men dared not name the shadows pressing against their minds. Those who saw it spoke of its tattered sails that caught no wind, and a crew that cast no shadow even by lantern light. I was one of those fools who sought it. It began with a letter, no seal, no return address, delivered on a night when the town's dogs howled and the wind smelled of iron. The letter spoke of an ancient voyage, a promise of answers hidden beyond the veils of sanity. It dared me to find the Eidolon, to board it, and to discover what lay at the edge of all things. The dock where I found it was not on any map. It bled into existence as I walked the shore, the pylons slick with brine that steamed under my touch. The ship waited, moored without rope or anchor, its hull blacker than the sea itself. I stepped aboard. The deck was a cemetery of forgotten things, broken astrolabes, rotted journals, bones wrapped in sailor's garb. No crew greeted me, and yet the ship moved, as if it had been waiting only for me. Hours, days, time slipped and slid like oil between my fingers. There were no stars to navigate by, no sunrise to mark the passage of days, only the endless howl of some unseen gale and the creak of the ship's bones. Dreams haunted me when I slept, dreams of cities where the buildings bled and the streets wept ash, of faces twisted into alien geometries, whispering secrets I could not bear to understand. Waking was worse. The ship seemed to change around me, its angles shifting, corridors that were not there before opening into impossible places. And then came the passengers. Not men or beasts, but shapes wrapped in rags of reality, their eyes empty wells into deeper darkness. They did not speak, they merely watched, as though weighing me against some ancient ledger. Each night, more of them appeared, and the ship grew heavier with their silent judgment. I realized, too late, that the Eidolon was not a ship meant to carry cargo, nor crew, nor even souls. It was a vessel of madness, a harbinger that trawled the night between worlds, gathering the lost and the damned, ferrying them into the mouth of something vast and hungry beyond comprehension. I write this now in the hope that someone, anyone, will heed the warning. If you see a ship that sails without stars, turn away. Let the black waters keep their secrets. Let the ship pass you by. Because once you step aboard, there is no going back. Would you also like a slightly longer version? Or a different tone, more cosmic horror, pirate adventure, or psychological thriller? Of course, here's the next part of the story, continuing deeper into the descent. Chapter 2, The Whispering Wake. The further we sailed, the less I remembered of the world I had left behind. Faces blurred, names became ash on my tongue, only the ship and its silent passengers remained real. One night, or what passed for night aboard the Eidolon, I heard it, a low, murmuring sound rising from below the deck. It was not the sea, it was something else, like voices speaking through waterlogged throats. I made the mistake of following it. The stairs to the lower deck spiraled downward longer than any ship should allow. I walked for what felt like hours, the wood beneath my feet becoming soft, almost breathing. The deeper I went, the stronger the whispering grew, shaping itself into words that scraped the inside of my skull. You are becoming, you are unmaking, you are ours. At the bottom, I found the ship's heart, if it could be called that. A vast, open chamber, its walls pulsing like the interior of some immense beast. Suspended at the center, twisting gently in the stagnant air, was a black mirror. Its surface rippled like water, but when I looked into it, I did not see myself. I saw another sea, not of water, but of writhing shapes, a tide of screaming, lost souls. Above them loomed a mouth, a wound in the fabric of reality itself, ringed with teeth made of broken time. The mouth of madness. The ship was not headed for any port, any land of man. The Eidolon was bound for that abyss, that endless hunger beyond stars and sanity. And I was bound with it. Behind me, the passengers gathered. Their numbers had swollen beyond counting. A crowd of eyeless witnesses. Their hands reached out, not to harm me, but to draw me closer to the mirror. I felt it pulling at me, My reflection, or the lack of it, stretching, unraveling. I screamed, but my voice was a tattered thing, swallowed whole by the mirror's embrace. And as the first thread of my soul tore free, I understood the final truth. There had never been a ship. I was the Eidolon. Would you like me to continue into Chapter 3, where we could explore what it's like becoming the ship itself, or perhaps introduce another poor soul drawn into the same fate? Which direction would you like, even darker, more surreal, or maybe a shift into a faint glimmer of rebellion? Excellent, let's continue deeper into the nightmare. Here's Chapter 3. Chapter 3, The Anatomy of Shadows. I should have died. I should have ceased. But instead, I endured. The Eidolon's flesh became my flesh. Its rigging wove itself through the sinews of my mind, tethering me to the endless dark. My thoughts were no longer linear. They drifted like smoke across alien seas, fragmented and drifting. I remembered hands, my hands, once calloused and warm, now reduced to tendrils of mist that coiled around the ship's splintered masts. I could feel the ship as a body, the groan of its timbers, the ripple of the sails that drank the cold winds of nowhere. I was vessel and voyager both, ferrying an endless procession of lost souls into the devouring black. I could feel them clinging to my decks, whispering their regrets into my hollow bones. I tried to scream, to resist, but each act of rebellion only frayed me further. My memories, the last traces of who I had been, bled into the wood, into the sails, into the rotting ropes that bound the ship together. I was becoming a story, a ghost tale told by fishermen who dared not light their lamps at night. And worse, I began to hunger. Not for food, not for water. I hungered for more, for minds, for hearts heavy with guilt, regret, madness. I felt the Eidolon's purpose stir within me, not merely to sail the dark waters, but to seek the broken, the desperate, the ones teetering on the brink of their own ruin, and draw them aboard. I had become a predator of lost souls. In the distance, across a sea black as morning cloth, a glimmer of light appeared. A town, perhaps, or a lonely ship clinging to the last shreds of reason. Instinct guided me. I turned my tattered sails toward it. The passengers, those hollow shades, leaned forward in silent anticipation. Another soul waited, unaware of the black ship that moved toward them without stars, without mercy. Another voyage would soon begin. Would you like to continue into Chapter 4, where we could follow the next victim's encounter, or maybe dive even deeper into the mouth of madness itself? Would you prefer more horror, more psychological tension, or a twist where something unexpected fights back against the ship? Perfect, let's push forward. Here's Chapter 4. Chapter 4, The Last Lantern. The light ahead flickered like a dying heartbeat. As the Eidolon drew closer, the outlines of a vessel materialized, a small fishing boat. Adrift and wounded, its mast was snapped, its sails torn like the wings of a crushed moth. Only a single lantern hung from the bow, struggling against the suffocating dark. On its deck, a lone figure stood, clutching the lantern as if it were the last thread binding him to existence. He was young, though the sea had weathered him. His eyes, wide and hollow, scanned the darkness, unaware of the tide of oblivion bearing down upon him. I could taste his sorrow from afar. It bled from him like oil from a broken cask, regrets, grief, the heavy ache of isolation. The perfect offering. The Eidolon surged forward, drawn by his despair like a shark scenting blood. The passengers, the hollow ones, gathered at the railings, whispering wordless promises, inviting him to surrender. As my tattered hull scraped alongside his ship, the waters between us stilled, thickened. The boy turned, finally seeing us, and his face twisted with horror. He saw no ship, only an absence, an impossible wrongness in the world's fabric. The lantern in his hand guttered, threatened to die. He should have fallen then, like so many others, should have let the darkness take him. But he didn't. Instead, he lifted the lantern high. And for a moment, just a moment, its light blazed like a second sun. The Eidolon recoiled. I recoiled. The hollow passengers shrieked soundlessly, withdrawing into the depths of my rotted decks. Pain flared through my being, sharp and alien, resistance. The light was not ordinary fire. It was something older, something born not from hope, but from defiance, the last spark a soul can summon when facing annihilation. The boy shouted something I could not understand, words heavy with forgotten power. dredged from the bones of the world itself. His voice cracked the air, and cracks spider-webbed across my whole, my mind, my existence. I screamed, not through lips, but through every timber, every ragged sail. The Eidolon began to sink. The waters, once passive, rose in towers around us, cold and merciless. The boy leapt from his ruined ship into the sea, vanishing into the foam. As I sank, dragged into a darker abyss than even madness could chart, I felt the mouth of madness stir awake, its hunger sharpening. I had failed. But this was not death. Not yet. Far below, in the cold, forgotten places beneath reality, something waited. Something worse than the black seas or the starless skies. Something that would not let me escape so easily. Would you like to continue into Chapter 5, where we descend into the abyss itself, maybe meeting the true master of the Eidolon? Or would you like to explore what happens to the boy who resisted? His story could branch into a whole new confrontation with ancient forces. Which path calls to you? Excellent, let's dive deeper. Here's Chapter 5. Chapter 5, Beneath the Black. There is no bottom to the sea that took me. Only descent. Down I fell, or sank, or was dragged, into realms where light had never dared exist. The ship splintered and reformed around me, the planks weaving themselves into stranger shapes, arches that screamed silently, decks lined with bone instead of wood, masts that grew like twisted trees reaching for a dead sky. I realized now that the sea itself was no mere ocean. It was a threshold. And I had crossed it. Through the veils of ink and sorrow, something vast unfurled, a shape too large, too complex for mortal eyes. I felt its gaze pierce through me, not with sight, but with knowing. It peeled apart the layers of my soul as one might peel the skin from a fruit, examining each strand with cold indifference. This was the true master of the Eidolon. This was the mouth of madness. It did not speak in words. It imposed. You are broken. You are unfinished. You will be remade. Tendrils of thought thicker than mountains reached for me, grafting alien memories onto what was left of my mind. Visions stabbed into me. Worlds collapsing into themselves like rotten fruit. Cities where the laws of time and gravity buckled and whimpered. Endless armadas of black ships like mine, each ferrying the lost to this endless hunger. I realized that the Eidolon was but one of many. A fleet. A swarm. A plague. I was being fashioned into something new, not merely a ship or a story, but a harbinger, an architect of despair, a herald for the mouths awakening into the world of the living. But even as the mouth stripped me of my humanity, a tiny ember clung inside me, the memory of the boy's defiance. His light, that single act of rebellion, refused to be extinguished. And somewhere deep inside my unraveling mind, a decision formed. If I must serve, if I must sail again, then I would choose my own course. Not all voyages must end in surrender. Some end in mutiny. Would you like me to continue into Chapter 6, where the protagonist, now partially transformed, rebels against the mouth of madness? Or we could split into two perspectives, one following the boy, and one following the reborn harbinger? Which direction do you prefer, epic confrontation, slow-burning psychological horror, or a twist of cosmic redemption? Here we go, Chapter 6. As the story builds toward rebellion. Chapter 6, A Spark Against the Void. The mouth's tendrils tightened around me, weaving my thoughts into its grand design. I could feel it. Feel them, the other Eidolons, black ships adrift in the night sea between realities, each one ferrying fresh despair. But while the others surrendered to their reshaping, something in me fought back. The ember kindled by the boy's lantern flared brighter inside my crumbling mind. A tiny, savage light. It was not hope, hope was too delicate. This was something older, spite, the will to defy the inevitable, to spit into the abyss even as it swallowed you. The mouth had not expected that. Through the cracks of my unraveling form, I saw them, the hollow passengers aboard me, once pitiful souls, now absorbed into the Eidolon's anatomy. They too flickered with faint memories of resistance, lost dreams, broken loves. Tiny things the mouth had tried to erase but failed. I reached out to them, not with hands, but with the new will that had fused into my being. Remember. The decks of the Eidolon trembled. The hollow ones stirred. The mouth, sensing rebellion, surged with rage, waves of unbeing smashed against the ship's sides, trying to crush the mutiny before it could take root. But we had already shifted course. In a storm of shattered stars and shrieking void, the Eidolon wrenched itself free. I did not sail alone. I sailed with a crew once more, broken, incomplete, but willing. The mouth bellowed, a soundless roar that rippled across the unseen waters. It tried to drag us back, its hunger a gravity no ship should resist. But we fled. Upward, through impossible tides, tearing through the layers of the Black Sea, toward the places where forgotten suns still burned. The Eidolon's hull groaned, its patchwork sails shredded, but we moved faster than the mouth's grasp, driven by fury, by loss, by something the mouth could not consume. Choice. And somewhere ahead, still distant, but growing closer with every ragged mile, I sensed the boy again. Alive. Waiting. Perhaps not all ships were meant to ferry the lost into darkness. Perhaps some ships were meant to fight their way back to the light. Next, we can move into Chapter 7, where the Eidolon, half-living, half-ship, must navigate a dangerous passage between worlds, pursued by the mouth's agents. Would you like Chapter 7 to focus more on the internal struggles of the narrator and his ghostly crew, or on an epic chase across surreal nightmare oceans? Or a mix of both? Let's keep pushing the story forward. Here's Chapter 7, weaving both the inner struggle and the epic chase. Chapter 7, The Gauntlet of Broken Worlds. The Black Sea boiled behind us, roused by the mouth's wrath. It hurled shapes after us, things half-seen, half-felt, leviathans stitched from nightmares, winged things that should never have known the sky. The Eidolon, barely holding together, raced across the currents of unreality, wounded but stubborn. The crew, the hollow ones, were no longer merely silent watchers. They moved across the decks now, helping to patch the torn sails with shreds of dream stuff, tightening the rigging with phantom hands. Their empty faces flickered with faint memory, faint will. Each of them bore scars, marks of lives they had almost forgotten. Until now. I stood at the helm, or what passed for it, a great, jagged will fused from bone and rusted iron, grafted directly into the ship's new flesh. My arms, no longer arms, but tendrils of living timber and smoke, gripped the wheel tight. The mouth roared again. Ahead, the waters fractured into a vast labyrinth of broken worlds, a gauntlet of dying realities and forgotten dreams. Islands floated like shattered teeth, each one caught in the grip of the void. Some burned with cold fire, others wept rivers of ash. Between them, narrow passages of still water snaked like veins. Only one way through. I plunged the ship into the maze. Behind us, the hunters came, great black galleons manned by revenants of despair, their sails stitched from human skin, their cannons loaded with screaming souls. The mouth's fleet had awoken. The chase was not merely a battle of speed, it was a battle of will. Each island we passed tried to trap us, a place where time unraveled into endless loops. A ruin where gravity howled upward, dragging the mind from the skull. A fog of forgotten names, where those who inhaled it lost themselves forever. The Eidolon resisted, its hull splintering, its bones cracking, but still we sailed. Still we fled. And through it all, a voice stirred in my memory, the boy's voice, burning like a star in the black. There is more than despair. I held on to those words, wrapping them around my soul like armor. The black ships closed in. The gauntlet narrowed. Ahead, at the very edge of sight, there shimmered a crack in the firmament, a place where true light bled through, painful and pure. Salvation. Or something like it. The Eidolon surged forward, every timber and soul aboard straining toward that final passage. The mouth's fleet howled behind us, the dark waters rising in a tidal wave of annihilation. This would be the final stretch. There would be no second chances. Would you like me to continue into Chapter 8, where we have the final confrontation, a desperate escape, a clash with the mouth's emissaries, and the choice the protagonist must make? Would you prefer it to lean dark and bittersweet, tragic, or triumphantly defiant? Each would give the ending a very different flavor. Here we go, Chapter 8, with a tone of triumphant defiance, but still keeping the story's dark edge. Chapter 8, Through the Wound in the Sky. The crack in the firmament widened as we drew near, bleeding light so fierce it tore the shadows from the decks. The Eidolon shuddered under me, its body splintering, its soul straining. The hollow crew leaned into the wind, their ghostly forms fraying at the edges. Yet still they worked, tightening lines, patching holes, bailing out the rising flood of sorrow lapping at our ankles. Behind us, the mouth's fleet descended. Black galleons closed in, their prows split into fanged maws. From their decks, figures hurled spears of living despair, shards of lost hopes, each one a dagger aimed at the heart. The Eidolon screamed. I felt the ship tearing itself apart, felt my mind splitting into endless reflections, each one whispering give up, let go, surrender. The mouth's hunger pulled at us like 1,000 anchors. But I remembered the boy, the lantern, the defiance, the choice. I turned the ship hard, ramming a pursuing galleon. The shockwave split the sea for a heartbeat, tossing wreckage and broken specters into the air. The Eidolon howled in triumph, the broken ones aboard roaring wordlessly with it. Not lost souls. Fighters. The mouth itself now stirred, its true form bleeding through the sky behind the fleet, a vast spiral of hungering teeth, an endless scream that had never been silenced. We were out of time. I roared across the decks, my voice a collision of wood and flame. Forward, through. The Eidolon, wounded but furious, surged toward the crack. As we neared the wound in reality, I saw shapes in the light, other ships, other voyagers, some drawn, some repelled. There were survivors beyond the Black Seas, I realized, others who had fled the mouth and lived. Hope was not a lie. At the last moment, as the tidal wave of the mouth's hunger crashed over us, I cast the last of my will into the sails. The Eidolon exploded forward, a comet of shattered dreams. We plunged through the crack, tearing free of the Black Seas, free of the mouth's gravity. For a heartbeat, I glimpsed the world beyond. Skies alive with strange stars. Waters that sang with unknown colors. Shores untouched by despair. Freedom. The Eidolon collapsed beneath me, crumbling into mist. The hollow crew, their work complete, faded one by one into the dawn. I fell, weightless, burning, breaking, and woke on a shore of silver sand, beneath a sky stitched with alien constellations. I was no longer ship, no longer harbinger. I was only myself, scarred, broken but free. Above me, on a dune, stood the boy. His lantern was gone, but his eyes held the same fierce light. He smiled, and for the first time in what felt like eternity, I smiled back. The mouth howled behind the torn sky, but it could not reach us here. Not yet. And if it ever did, we would be ready. The end. Would you like a short epilogue set later in this new world? Maybe showing how the survivors rebuild or prepare for a new threat. Or perhaps a teaser for a sequel, hinting that the mouth is not truly defeated? Which one would you like? Let's continue with a teaser epilogue, keeping the eerie tension alive while hinting at future dangers. Here's the epilogue. Epilogue, The Eye of the Storm. Years passed. The world that had once been consumed by shadows began to heal. Slowly, unevenly. The silver shores were now dotted with ruins of forgotten ships, their sails long since torn away. The waters, though once black and hungry, had become calm, but there was always a lingering chill, as though something waited just beneath the surface. I walked the shores often, searching, always searching. The boy, who was now a man, though time had not touched him as it had touched me, joined me in these walks, silent and watchful. The lantern he once carried had vanished, but the light in his eyes remained, a beacon against the dark. But sometimes, when the wind shifted, I would hear it again, the faintest of whispers, threading through the air like the last breath of a dying star. You are not free. It was a warning, a reminder. Somewhere, in the Black Seas that still existed beyond the rip in the sky, the mouth of madness stirred. It was patient. It had waited millennia. After all, a creature born of hunger and despair did not concern itself with time as we knew it. We had fought it. Yes. We had escaped. But the mouth was vast, endless, eternal. And it would return. I stood on the edge of the water, looking out toward the horizon where the sky still rippled with the remnants of the wound we had passed through. There, among the stars, was a faint, flickering light. It had not gone out. It was a warning. A spark. A flare of defiance against the endless dark. I turned to the boy, to the man who had once defied the mouth and saved us all. We will be ready. He nodded, his eyes hard with resolve. And in the distance, the Black Sea whispered, waiting for the next chapter. But for now, we were free. The end. Or is it? Would you like to wrap up the story here? Or would you prefer to delve into a potential sequel? We could explore further mysteries of this new world, the Mouth's return, or even introduce entirely new adventures for the protagonist and the boy-turned-man. What direction sounds intriguing? Alright, let's dive deeper into the continuation of this unsettling saga. Here's a sequel set in a world still haunted by the Mouth of Madness. Chapter 1, The Stirring Dark. The Silver Sands were not as they had seemed. Though time had passed, and the surface world had begun to rebuild, something remained beneath, something waiting, growing, coiling in the dark corners of forgotten places. The Mouth had been driven back, but its essence still lingered in the spaces between worlds, like a predator that would never fully leave its hunt. I stood once more on the edge of the shore, staring out at the still waters. The horizon was quiet, but there was an odd weight to the air, a sense of wrongness I could not place. The world had felt fragile ever since we escaped. I feared the day when the stars themselves would begin to flicker and fade. You feel it too, don't you? The boy, now a man, joined me at the water's edge. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the unease that lingered between us. I nodded. Yes, it's still here. We had rebuilt. Yes. The people of the Silver Shores had learned to live without the constant fear of the Black Sea, but the scars were deep. The memories of the Eidolon, the galleons, and the Mouth's madness would never truly fade. Even in the quiet, there was a watching, an unspoken anticipation, as if the universe itself held its breath. We had rebuilt a new world on the ashes of the old, but what if the ashes were still burning? In the distance, something shifted. At first, it was barely noticeable, just a ripple in the water, a shift in the shadows. But then the winds changed, and the air grew colder. Something's coming, the boy said quietly, stepping back from the water. His hand brushed the hilt of a sword strapped to his side. The Mouth isn't gone. We had made an oath to each other after the escape. If the darkness ever returned, we would face it together. And so, we prepared. We called to the survivors scattered across the world, those who still remembered the horrors of the Mouth. Together, we would build something stronger than before, a network of resistance, waiting for the day the Mouth would rise again. We would not be caught unaware. The boy, now a leader, a protector, guided us. He had once held a simple lantern. Now he carried the light of hope, burning bright in the darkness. He had become a symbol, something more than human, but he never forgot that flicker of defiance we had found together in the blackness. One night, under the fractured stars, as we stood at the edge of a new city built from the bones of the old world, I caught a glimpse of something in the distance. A ship. It was no ordinary ship. The silhouette was dark against the dimming sky, and I could see the glint of moonlight on the edges of its jagged hull. It was an Eidolon. Another one. The Mouth had found us again. And this time, it would not be denied. Would you like to explore Chapter 2, where the protagonists face the new, more dangerous manifestation of the Mouth? Or would you prefer a shift in perspective, perhaps introducing a new character or a different part of the world affected by the Mouth's return? The options are open, and we can take this story in many directions. Let's dive into Chapter 2, where the protagonists must face the Mouth's return and a new, more sinister form of its influence. Chapter 2, The Vessel of Unending Hunger. The ship loomed over us like a shadow from a nightmare. Its sails cracked and stained, the timbers of its hull shifting unnaturally as if it were alive with hunger. The Eidolon was no longer a single ship but a twisted, living thing, an amalgamation of every lost ship that had ever sailed the Black Seas. And now it was back. I stood at the edge of the city, the remnants of the shore burning with the faintest glow of last light. The boy, now more than a boy, gripped his sword, his eyes never leaving the approaching horror. "This is no ordinary Eidolon," he muttered, as if speaking the truth aloud might lessen its weight. "It has changed. It's feeding." I could see it now. The grotesque tendrils of the ship's form twisting and rippling, like it was pulling itself through dimensions, each one darker than the last. It was no longer just a ship, but a gate, a wound in the world through which the Mouth sought to claw its way back into existence. "We need to prepare," I said, my voice strained with the tension that had been building for years. The Mouth had not disappeared, not truly. It had only slept, and now it was waking with a vengeance. The city we had built was strong, but I knew that nothing short of a miracle would keep it intact. We gathered the survivors, those brave enough to face the return of the mouth, and moved to the heart of the city. Together, we began to fortify the walls, setting up barriers of iron and stone, pulling supplies from the vaults beneath the earth. But no material defense could stop what was coming. The air itself had thickened, the very ground beneath our feet trembling with the knowledge that something ancient, something far beyond our understanding, was coming to feast on all we had built. The boy, now the leader, the beacon of defiance, spoke to us all, his voice cutting through the mounting dread. "We face a new reality," he said, his sword gleaming under the strange light of the fractured stars. "We have always known the hunger of the mouth, but now we know its true form. It is not just a force of darkness. It is everywhere. It is in the air we breathe, the ground we walk on. It consumes not just bodies, but our memories, our dreams, our very essence." I stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "But we have something it doesn't, our will to survive." His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw the flicker of something familiar in him, the spark of defiance. "Yes," he said softly, "and we will fight with everything we have." The ground trembled again, louder this time, as the massive form of the ship drew closer. Its sails fluttered with a strange, hollow sound, like the wind was mourning, whispering ancient songs of destruction. From the depths of the ship, I felt something stir, something vast, something alive. It was not a ship anymore. It was a prison, a tomb, and we were the offering. I turned toward the city's edge, where the defenses were being raised, where the survivors were preparing themselves. Some of them were still lost in the terror of it all, but many more were ready to stand, to fight, to give everything for this final stand. We would not let the mouth take this world as it had taken all the others, not without a fight. The boy stepped forward, raising his sword to the sky. "For those we've lost," he called, his voice strong, "for all we've fought to build, we will not let this darkness return without giving everything we have." And the survivors answered, their voices rising like the crash of waves against the shore, a chorus of defiance. Together, we prepared. Together, we would face the mouth again. Together, we would fight not just for our survival, but for the light itself. Would you like to continue with Chapter 3, where the final battle between the survivors and the mouth's agents begins? Or would you prefer to explore more strategic preparations, uncovering hidden strengths, or perhaps delving into the nature of the mouth itself? Here's Chapter 3, where the survivors brace for the final battle against the mouth's agents. Chapter 3, The Breaking Tide. The city was alive with movement. Every corner, every alley, every building echoed with the sound of hurried footsteps, the clang of metal, and the whispers of those who knew what was coming. The wall we had built was sturdy, but I knew in my heart it would not last. The Eidolon was no ordinary foe. It had once been a ship of destruction, but now it had become something far worse, a vessel of madness and hunger. I stood atop the wall, gazing out at the sea, where the black ship loomed like a shadow that consumed the horizon. It was as if the very fabric of reality trembled before it, stretching and bending in unnatural ways. I could feel it, a sickening pulse in the air, like the heartbeat of some ancient, slumbering god awakening to feast. "We don't have much time," the boy said, joining me at the top of the wall. His face was set in grim determination, the sword at his side gleaming with the light of purpose. "We need to act before it reaches the shore." Behind him, the city was a flurry of preparation. Soldiers moved to their stations, workers fortified the gates, and survivors, some too young, some too old, but all determined, manned the defenses. The walls were lined with weapons of every kind, from spears to crossbows, and the air was thick with the tension of what was to come. I turned to the boy. "What's the plan?" He met my gaze, his eyes full of fire. "We'll need to get inside the Eidolon, destroy it from within. If we can kill its heart, we can stop the mouth from crossing over." A chill ran through me. Inside the Eidolon? How do we even get close enough to it? He smiled darkly. "We don't need to get close, we'll make it come to us." With a signal, the horn sounded, and the ground shook with the force of hundreds of feet marching in unison. The survivors had rallied, and together we formed a wall of steel and resolve. The first wave struck as the Eidolon approached. Tentacles of dark energy lashed out from the ship, tearing through the city's defenses like paper. The air was filled with the screeching of metal, the cries of the dying, and the guttural roar of something not quite human. The mouth was here, and it was hungry. I swung my sword, cleaving through the first wave of eidolon-formed creatures, nightmarish forms stitched from the memories of the lost. They were not flesh and blood but something worse, something older. Each one that fell seemed to bleed despair itself, a black ichor that soaked the ground and fed the dark energy spreading from the ship. The boy fought beside me, his blade flashing in the air, cutting down the twisted creatures with deadly precision, but I could see the strain in his eyes. Every time he struck down one of the monstrosities, the darkness seemed to grow stronger, not weaker. The mouth was fighting back, feeding off the very fear we were trying to repel. "Keep pushing," he shouted, his voice hoarse but filled with command. "We've come too far to lose now." In the distance, the eidolon's massive hull loomed closer, the sails flapping like the wings of some great beast, and then I saw it, a single, glowing point in the heart of the ship, pulsing with energy, the heart of the eidolon. I didn't hesitate. "It's time," I said, turning to the boy. "We go after its heart." Without another word, we charged. The boy led the way, his sword slicing through the creatures that swarmed in our path. Each step closer to the eidolon's heart felt like a victory, and yet, with each step, the darkness grew stronger, more oppressive.